I walked into my sister's baby shower holding two envelopes. One contained a gift for my new nephew. The other contained a lawsuit for forgery and a legal notice that would make her lose a $50,000 inheritance she thought was guaranteed. My name is Phyllis, and for the longest time, I thought I knew what family meant. I was wrong. It all came to a head on a sunny Saturday afternoon at my sister Denise's baby shower for her fifth child. In front of our entire family, aunts, cousins, her oblivious friends, I walked up to her, holding two envelopes. Her smile was wide, expectant. The first envelope was a pale yellow card with a duck on it, a simple congratulations. The other was a crisp, white, legal-sized envelope. I handed them both to her. Inside the second one was a lawsuit for the $20,000 she stole from me by forging my signature, the money that cost us our parents' diner. It also contained a formal notice to our family's lawyer, invoking the morality clause in our grandparents' $50,000 trust fund, effectively cutting her off. Her smile didn't just fade, it shattered. Right there, among the pastel balloons and half-eaten cupcakes, her perfect world began to collapse. But this wasn't an impulse. This was the final move in a war I never wanted to fight. To understand how a sister could be pushed this far, to the point of orchestrating one of those family revenge stories you only hear about, you have to understand the 3 years of hell that came before it. You have to go back to the beginning, to the town of Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I lost everything and became my sister's unpaid, unappreciated nanny. If you've ever been pushed to your absolute limit by the people who are supposed to love you most, don't just watch. Hit that like button so the algorithm knows these kinds of stories need to be told. Our story really begins in South Scranton, a place where steel mills once hummed and everybody knew your parents. My mom and dad ran a small diner there called the Keystone Griddle. It wasn't fancy, just a simple place with worn vinyl booths and the constant smell of brewing coffee and frying bacon. When they passed, they left it to Denise and me. It was more than a business worth $75,000. It was our legacy, our connection to them. I poured my heart, my soul, and every cent I had into keeping it alive. But within a year, it was gone, foreclosed by the bank. I thought it was my fault. I carried that failure like a shroud, a heavy, suffocating shame that made it easy for my older sister to swoop in like a savior. She offered me her spare room, a place to get back on my feet. I saw it as an act of mercy. I packed up the broken pieces of my life and moved into her noisy, chaotic 3-bedroom house, grateful for the lifeline. I didn't know then that I wasn't a guest being saved. I was a resource being acquired. I was walking into a cage disguised as a sanctuary, and the price of admission was my entire future. It's a strange weight, trying to carry on a family legacy while feeling completely stuck. If you've ever felt like the weight of your past was holding you in place, just type the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this silent strength reaches. Getting back on my feet turned into becoming the household engine, and I was running on fumes. My days started at 5:30 a.m. with an alarm that felt like a punch to the gut. The first battle was waking up Walter, my 16-year-old nephew, who had mastered the art of teenage indifference. Then came the younger three, a tidal wave of needs. Spilled milk on the kitchen floor was a daily ritual, followed by arguments over the last Pop-Tart, and desperate searches for a missing soccer cleat or a history textbook. I was the short-order cook, the conflict mediator, the chauffeur in my beat-up sedan, and the last-minute homework checker, all before 7:30 a.m. After dropping them off at 3 different schools, I'd rush to my 10-hour shift at a Sunoco gas station off the interstate, a job that smelled of gasoline and stale coffee, just to make ends meet. Nights were my only sliver of hope. After dinner, baths, and bedtime stories for a family that wasn't mine, I'd pry open my laptop around 11 p.m., my eyes burning, to study for my online accounting classes. That was my escape plan, my one ticket out of Scranton. But most nights, I'd fall asleep mid-lecture, waking up with my cheek stuck to the keyboard. Denise and her boyfriend, Frank, were ghosts in this life I was managing. They worked different shifts, and when they were home, they were walled off in their bedroom, the sound of the television a constant, dull murmur. I was living their life, raising their children, and my own was fading into an exhausted, blurry dream. For 2 years, I carried the weight of that failure. I believed I was the one who had let our parents down, who had destroyed their legacy. Then one rainy Tuesday, while looking for an old photo album in the basement, I stumbled upon a dusty box I'd saved from the diner's office. Inside, beneath old tax forms, was a manila folder I'd never seen before. My hands grew cold as I opened it. It was a loan agreement from the Scranton Community Bank, dated just a few months before the business went under. The amount was for exactly $20,000. The collateral listed was the Keystone Griddle. My breath hitched when I saw the signature line for the co-owner. It was my name, Phyllis, scrawled in a familiar yet slightly off imitation of my handwriting. It wasn't my signature. It was a forgery. In that damp, musty basement, the last 2 years of my life replayed in my mind, but this time with horrifying clarity. The shame I felt wasn't mine to carry. It had been carefully placed on my shoulders by my own sister. That sudden trip Denise took to Florida, the down payment on Frank's new truck, it all clicked into place. She hadn't just let me take the fall, she had engineered it. She had stolen our parents' legacy, watched me crumble under the guilt, and then offered me a cage to live in, disguised as kindness. The exhaustion I felt before was nothing compared to the cold, hard rage that began to solidify in my chest. The worst betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people who are supposed to be your safe harbor. Let me know, were you ever the scapegoat in your family? Type fixer if you were always the one cleaning up messes. Or ghost if you were the one they pretended wasn't even there. I want to see the roles we were forced to play. I held onto that cold, hard truth for a week, watching them. I saw every lazy excuse, every dollar they wasted on lottery tickets and cheap beer while I was using my gas station earnings to buy shoes for their kids. The final confrontation didn't happen in a storm of shouting. It happened over a quiet dinner of frozen pizza and wilted salad. Denise, beaming with a self-satisfied glow, made her grand announcement. "We have some news. We're pregnant." Frank sat beside her, puffing out his chest like he'd just won the lottery. I felt nothing. No joy, no surprise, just the hollow thud of another anchor being chained to my leg. Then came the real agenda. "So, we've been thinking," Denise began, her voice syrupy sweet. "You're so wonderful with the kids, Phyllis. And with the new baby coming. We think it's time for you to be here full-time. You should quit that dead-end gas station job and put those accounting classes on hold." I just stared at her, my fork frozen midair. Frank chimed in, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Yeah, it's time you started pulling your weight around here. We figure $400 a month for rent is fair. You're using our electricity, eating our food." It was breathtaking. They weren't just asking for my help anymore. They were demanding I set fire to my own future to warm their house. They wanted me to pay them for the privilege of raising their children after they had already stolen my inheritance. In that moment, the anger in my chest didn't burn hot. It turned to ice. I didn't say a word. I just pushed my chair back from the table, mumbled something about needing air, and walked out the back door into the humid Pennsylvania night. I sat in my freezing car, the engine off, the silence a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside. My hands were shaking as I dialed the only person I knew would give me the unvarnished truth, my best friend, Irene. She was a paralegal, a woman who dealt with facts, not feelings. I told her everything, the words spilling out in a torrent: the pregnancy, the demand for rent, and finally, the quiet, damning truth about the forged signature on the $20,000 loan. I expected sympathy, maybe some comforting words. That's not what Irene does. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then her voice came through, sharp and clear as glass. "Phyllis, you need to stop thinking of her as your sister," she said, her tone devoid of emotion. "From a legal standpoint, she's a felon. What she did is called bank fraud and forgery. What she's doing now, demanding you pay her to raise her own kids after she bankrupted you, that's exploitation, plain and simple." She took a breath. "You don't just pack a bag and leave. You're past that. You need to gather your evidence, make copies of that loan document, and you need to see a lawyer. Don't get emotional, get strategic." Hearing it laid out like that, so clinically, so coldly, was like a splash of ice water. She was right. This was no longer just a family drama. It was a crime scene. And I was done being the victim. Acting on Irene's advice felt like shifting a massive gear inside my soul. The next morning, instead of wallowing in anger, I felt a cold sense of purpose. I took a personal day from the gas station and found the number for Mr. Gable, our parents' old lawyer, a kind, elderly man who had handled their estate. I met him in his dusty office, the air thick with the smell of old paper and leather. I laid out the forged loan document on his mahogany desk. He put on his reading glasses, his brow furrowing as he examined the signature. He didn't say a word, just nodded slowly, a grim look on his face. Then, he did something I never expected. He pulled out our grandparents' file. "Phyllis," he said, his voice gentle, "there's something you need to know about." He explained that our grandparents had set up a $50,000 trust fund intended for Denise to access once her youngest child turned 18 to help with their upbringing. My heart sank. It felt like another gift she didn't deserve. But Mr. Gable continued, tapping a specific paragraph with his pen. "Your grandparents were wise. They included what we call a morality clause." He explained the clause gave the trustee him the power to withhold or even redistribute the funds if the beneficiary, Denise, engaged in illegal acts or behavior that was demonstrably harmful to another family member. It was a fail-safe, a weapon left behind by ghosts. That forged signature wasn't just a betrayal, it was now the key to everything. I wasn't just fighting for $20,000 anymore. I was fighting for $50,000 of justice. If this story is hitting you hard, don't just watch. Hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories of fighting back matter, and it tells me that my own fight wasn't in vain. Armed with this knowledge, I transformed. I became an actress in my own home. The next morning, when Denise asked if I'd thought about her offer, I gave her a tired smile and said, "I'm considering my options." My compliance was a mask. My quietness was a strategy. She saw submission, but what was really happening was a silent declaration of war. Every night, after the house fell silent, my real work began. I wasn't just studying spreadsheets for my accounting class anymore. I was creating my own. I calculated every dollar I had, figuring out what it would take to break free. My savings were just under $3,000, barely enough for a security deposit and first month's rent. On my phone, under the guise of scrolling social media, I scoured rental listings. I found it a week later, a tiny, third-floor walk-up studio apartment above a laundromat on the other side of Scranton. It was nothing special, just 4 walls and a window overlooking a brick alley. But to me, it was a kingdom. While Denise and Frank snored in their room, I made secret trips to a 24-hour copy center, duplicating the forged loan agreement and other documents Mr. Gable had given me. I stored one set in a safe deposit box I opened with the last of my emergency cash and emailed digital copies to Irene. During the day, I was still Aunt Phyllis, the reliable fixer of all problems. I made peanut butter sandwiches, refereed video game disputes, and nodded politely at Denise's endless complaints. But at night, I was a general planning a meticulous, calculated escape from enemy territory. A week before I planned to move, I knew I couldn't just disappear. My war was with Denise, not her children. They were victims, too. So, I started what I called the Walter Project. One evening, I pulled my 16-year-old nephew aside. He was a good kid, quiet and observant, already carrying the weight of his parents' indifference on his slumped shoulders. "Walter," I said, my voice low and serious, "I'm going to need you to be the man of the house. Really be it." At first, he just grunted, the typical teenage response. But I persisted. I walked him through the basics his parents had never bothered to teach him. I showed him how to do laundry without turning all the whites a sad shade of pink. We spent an afternoon in the kitchen where I taught him to make 3 simple meals: spaghetti, grilled cheese, and tacos enough to keep his siblings fed. I showed him how to read the labels on medicine bottles and how to check his little sister's asthma inhaler to make sure it wasn't empty. He was resistant at first, but then, as we were standing over the stove, he looked at me, his eyes older than his years. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked, not with anger, but with a quiet resignation. "This is because of Mom." I just nodded. I wasn't abandoning them. I was giving them a lifeboat. I was teaching their captain how to navigate the storm that was their mother. There's a quiet strength in those who are forced to become the adult in the room long before their time. Did you have to grow up too fast for your family? I want to know if you were the savior who always had to be responsible, or if you were lucky enough to just be the kid. Let's see the balance in the comments. The day I rented a U-Haul van to move my last few boxes, Denise must have sensed she was losing her grip on me for good. Her desperation turned venomous. As I was carrying a box of books down the front steps, a Scranton police patrol car pulled up to the curb. My blood ran cold. 2 officers got out, their expressions unreadable. Denise was already on the porch, launching into a masterful performance of a distraught, betrayed sister. Tears streamed down her face as she pointed a trembling finger at me. "She did it, officers," she wailed, loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "She's robbing me blind." She took $1,500 in cash I had saved in my dresser and my grandmother's diamond brooch. It's a family heirloom. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, the cardboard box digging into my arms. It was a lie, a spectacular, unhinged lie designed to humiliate me, to potentially ruin my life with a criminal record. One of the officers approached me, his hand resting near his sidearm. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint of theft. We're going to need you to put the box down and speak with us." He was professional, but his eyes were filled with suspicion. In that moment, everything I had worked for, my escape, my future, my very freedom, felt like it was about to be snatched away by one final, vicious act of sabotage from the sister I once trusted with my life. This was her endgame. If she couldn't own me, she would destroy me. Just as one of the officers asked to see my identification, the front door creaked open. Walter stepped out onto the porch, his phone in his hand as if he'd been recording. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't crying. His voice was unnervingly calm. "Excuse me, officers," he said, looking right past his mother and directly at them. "You're looking for my great-grandmother's diamond brooch." Denise's face, which had been a mask of sorrow, flickered with panic. "Walter, go back inside," she hissed. But he ignored her. "You can't find it here," he continued, his eyes like steel. "Because my mom pawned it last Christmas to get Frank's truck out of the impound lot. I have the receipt from the pawn shop on Cedar Avenue right here on my phone." He then turned his attention to the missing cash. "And that $1,500? That was the last of Aunt Phyllis's savings. She gave it to my mom 3 weeks ago because the landlord was threatening to evict us." I heard the entire conversation. A dead silence fell over the yard. Denise's fake sobs choked in her throat. Her elaborate lie had been dismantled in less than 30 seconds by her own son. The police officers exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance. The senior officer turned to my sister. "Ma'am, filing a false police report is a serious offense. We could take you in for this." He let the threat hang in the air before nodding curtly to me. "Sorry for the disturbance, ma'am. You're free to go." As they left, Denise didn't look at me. She stared at her son with a look of pure venom. She hadn't just lost the battle. She'd been exposed by the very person she'd neglected for years. In the darkest moments, sometimes your savior appears in the most unexpected form. It's a powerful feeling when someone finally speaks the truth for you. Has someone ever been your Walter, the one person who stood up when no one else would? If you've ever had an unexpected hero in your life, just type hero in the comments. I want to see how many of us have been saved by quiet courage. After the police left, I didn't say another word to Denise. I finished loading the U-Haul in silence, feeling Walter's watchful eyes on me from his bedroom window. Driving away from that house felt like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for years. That first night in my tiny studio, I didn't even have a bed, just a sleeping bag on the floor. But as I lay there in the quiet, listening to the hum of the laundromat below, I felt a profound sense of peace. The space was mine. The silence was mine. The future was mine. I wasn't just reacting to chaos anymore. I was in control. For the next few weeks, I focused on creating a semblance of a normal life. I worked my shifts, I caught up on my classes, and I spoke to Walter on the phone every few days, making sure he and his siblings were okay. I was content to let the legal process with Mr. Gable play out slowly. But then, opportunity, disguised as a phone call from my well-meaning Aunt Judith, knocked on my door. "Phyllis, honey, "I know things are tense," she'd said, completely unaware of the police incident. "But Denise is having her baby shower next month. The whole family will be there. You have to come. For the baby. It's about family." In the past, that word family would have been a trigger for guilt. Now, it was a trigger for strategy. Denise craved an audience. She built her entire identity around the performance of being a beleaguered but loving matriarch. A baby shower wasn't just a party, it was her stage. And I realized, with chilling certainty, that it was the perfect place to deliver the final act of this story. I walked into that baby shower like an actress taking the stage for her final performance. I wore a simple blue dress, brought a small gift of baby blankets, and smiled politely at my aunts and cousins. Denise was in her glory, sitting on a makeshift throne of pillows, surrounded by a mountain of presents. She held court, recounting exaggerated tales of her pregnancy woes, soaking up the sympathy like a sponge. I watched and waited, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum in my chest. I let her have her moment, let her open every last gift until only my small, neatly wrapped box remained. After a tearful speech thanking everyone for their generosity, I stood up. A hush fell over the small crowd. "I have one last gift for you, Denise," I said, my voice clear and even, cutting through the afternoon air. I walked towards her and handed her 2 envelopes. "This one," I said, pointing to the yellow one, "is for the baby. I wish him a better life." Then I held up the crisp, white legal envelope. "And this one," I said, my voice dropping but losing none of its edge, "is for you." I watched as her fingers, clumsy with shock, tore it open. The color drained from her face as she saw the official court seal on the lawsuit and the letter from Mr. Gable regarding the trust fund. A wave of confused whispers swept through the family. "What is this, Phyllis?" she stammered, her voice a pathetic whimper. "This," I replied, looking not just at her but at everyone who had enabled her for years, "is called accountability." There's a terrifying, electric moment when you decide you will no longer be the keeper of someone else's toxic secrets. It's the point of no return. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and speaking your own truth? Just type peace or truth in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which path more of us have been forced to take. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I just turned and walked to my car, leaving the wreckage of the baby shower behind me. But I heard all about it later from my Aunt Judith, her voice a mix of horror and grudging respect. The party disintegrated into a storm of accusations and denials. But the facts, printed on official legal documents, were undeniable. The family, who had for so long enabled Denise's learned helplessness, finally saw her for what she was. They didn't just take my side, they backed away from her like she was radioactive. Her social standing within the family evaporated overnight. Frank, ever the opportunist, saw the writing on the wall. With no free nanny, no inheritance on the horizon, and a mountain of legal trouble, he was gone within a week. He packed his things while Denise was at a doctor's appointment and simply vanished, leaving her to face the consequences alone with a 5th child on the way. The lawsuit was a straightforward case. With the forged document as Exhibit A, the court issued a judgment against her for the full $20,000, plus interest and legal fees. Unable to pay, she was forced to declare bankruptcy, a public record of her financial ruin. Mr. Gable, true to his word, officially restructured the trust fund. Denise would never see a dime of it directly. Instead, the money would be managed by his firm, paying for the children's essential needs only upon submission of receipts. The free ride was over. Her support system, her boyfriend, and her financial safety net all gone. While Denise's world imploded, mine began to bloom. The destructive energy I had focused on getting justice, I now channeled into construction. I poured every ounce of my being into my accounting classes. The numbers on the spreadsheets weren't just homework anymore. They were a language of empowerment, a blueprint for a life no one could ever take from me again. After graduating with honors from my community college program, I took the biggest risk of all. I used the small settlement from the lawsuit not for a vacation or a new car, but as seed money to start my own business. I called it Keystone Financial Services, a quiet tribute to my parents' diner, the Keystone Griddle. My mission was simple. I would help other small business owners in Scranton florists, mechanics, Local diner owners avoid the same kind of financial ruin that had almost destroyed me. My first client was a woman who ran a small bakery. When she handed me my first check for $500, I went to my car and cried. They were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. It was money I had earned through my own skill, my own hard work. It was clean. Within a year, I had enough clients to move out of the tiny studio and into a proper one-bedroom apartment. I could pay my bills without a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I was building a life from the ashes of the one my sister had burned down, and for the first time, I felt something I never thought possible. I felt proud. So, what does life look like now? It's quiet, it's stable, it's mine. I still talk to the kids. Through Mr. Gable's strict management of the trust, I make sure Walter has what he needs for his college applications and that his siblings have winter coats and school supplies. I see them on video calls, and I am their aunt, a loving, supportive, but distant figure. I am a safe harbor, not their primary caregiver. That is a boundary I will hold for the rest of my life. People sometimes ask me if I've forgiven my sister. Forgiveness is a complicated word. I don't know if I will ever forget the depth of her betrayal, and I don't believe forgiveness means inviting that chaos back into my life. But I have let go of the anger. I had to. Holding on to that rage was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. My justice wasn't found in her downfall, but in my own rise. The true karma, the real consequence, wasn't her poverty or her loneliness. It was the glaring contrast of my success, built on the integrity she tried to beat out of me. Family, I've learned, is not always about the blood you share. Sometimes, it's about the people who show up for you, who reflect your worth back at you, who give you the truth, even when it's hard. It's about the boundaries you build to protect your peace and the life you create from the ground up. My revenge wasn't a single act at a baby shower. It was every single day that I chose to build a better life for myself, proving that the best response to being buried is to bloom. The world may never know the private wars we fight just to survive our own families, but the people in this community do. This space is for those who had to build their own lifeboats. If these stories speak your truth, and you believe in the quiet power of rebuilding, then make sure you subscribe and join a family that understands.